Hello and welcome back. It's been a while since I've made a review, and it was very nice to come back and see that my subscriber count has ballooned from, say, 28 to 36 or so. So, that's strong growth. Very strong growth. Today we're going to be taking a look at a very quirky pair of loudspeakers from the late 80s, early 90s, the Celestion 3000. And I know you're probably looking at them now going, what the hell? Why do they look like that? And, I was like you too. When I saw them, I went, what the hell? Why do they look like that? And, as we dive deeper into this review, we will explore the design and how that translates into how it sounds. Now, some of you might already be familiar with the Celestion brand, but we'll do a quick whirlwind tour for the uninitiated. In the post-war years, Celestion was busy dithering around making TV speakers and PA systems, and it wasn't until the late 60s that they unleashed their first consumer-oriented floor speaker onto the British public, and that arrived in the form of the Celestion Ditton. Quite iconic, I believe. I've seen a few Ditton 66 speakers go up for sale around me, and they do seem to get snapped up quite quickly. At around the same time the Ditton was being launched, Celestion decided to merge with a clothing company, I guess to diversify the portfolio. Not an important fact, but it's just something interesting to know. Now, if we fast forward a few years to the 1980s, Celestion really upped the ante and launched a speaker called the SL600, which sounds like a Mercedes-Benz. But naming conventions aside, this was a speaker that was very well received by critics and the audiophile community at the time. But enough about the past. Let's jump forward to 1989, where the Celestion 3000 splashed onto the scene at a Berlin audio show alongside the Celestion 5000, which was the same as the 3000 except it had better veneer, and then the 7000, which as far as I can tell is just two 3000s stuck together. That was the top of the range one. When these launched, they retailed for $1,800 American dollars, which equates to about 4,000 American dollars in today's money. So they are not cheap at all. And that was before you had to factor in the $400 stands that they came with. Optional, they said. As we go further into this, I will tell you why they would not have been optional in the slightest. So, with the stands, you're looking at a $2,200 speaker in 1990, which is a hefty chunk of change by anybody's standards. Now, in the grand scheme of hi-fi, $4,000 isn't really that much money for a pair of speakers. But I think it is a lot of money for a pair of speakers that look as bad as this. Hey, maybe it looked better with the brown veneer, but in black, it's a bit grim. I'm really struggling to articulate why I feel that these are ugly. And I don't know, the best I can sort of come up with is it's like some Star Wars fan built a papier-mâché model of a ship that he would have liked to have been in a Star Wars movie or something. It's like ugly sci-fi. Ugly sci-fi. I don't think they're beautiful by anybody's standards. And I know beauty's in the eye of the beholder, but I'm not sure who would be beholding the beauty of the Celestion 3000. And that brings me on to the build of the Celestion 3000. And don't get me wrong, they feel incredibly solid, well braced, good heft, but there's something quite rudimentary about the construction as well. Like the big just slabs of MDF with massive overhang at the rear. Then we get to the grille, which weighs a ton because it is another giant slab of MDF. And even though there's only one mid-bass woofer on the Celestion 3000, there are 3 cutouts in the grille, and I can only assume that they had 2 practice runs before they did the final hole for the mid-bass driver, or maybe they were looking at ways to remove some of the excess weight from the slab. Either way, it's quite confusing. Moving around to the rear, we find ourselves looking at a pair of horizontally arranged binding posts. Another quirky detail, I guess. But, you know, despite my reservations about the outward appearance of the 3000, they definitely did their homework when it came to engineering that massive ribbon tweeter that we see mounted on a 45-degree angle at the front. The ribbon on the 3000 is a monopole, and what that means is that sound only projects forwards from it, not back, as well as you'd find on dipole ribbon speakers like Apogee, for instance. With the assistance of an old Stereophile article, I will now attempt to partially explain how they did this. Basically, the housing the ribbon is in has a cavity behind it, and they filled it with sound-absorbing material so that as the sound was projected from the rear, by the time it reflected back, it had been attenuated to the point of inaudibility by that material, thus converting it to monopole. Alright, enough with the pleasantries. Let's talk about how they sound. So the crossover point for the ribbon is 900 Hz, which means the mid-bass is just taking care of everything below that. And I will say they do have good extension. The bass does go satisfyingly deep on these. The star of the show, probably unsurprisingly, is that ribbon tweeter. This speaker's presentation is all about the vocals. And, you know, when I was listening to songs from Nick Cave's album Ghost Teen, or even Tammy Wynette, I've been bumping a lot of Tammy Wynette, it was all about the vocals. The ribbon tweeter is unlike any soft dome tweeter I've heard. It doesn't honk or squawk the same way. It's a much smoother presentation of vocals than what I'm used to. But I think there is definitely a boost in the treble, or maybe the upper mid-range, because after a while I did start to find the sound a bit fatiguing. I'd say the strongest strength of these is their imaging. They image like a surgeon, and they're very transparent, and I find they tend to vanish as well, which is something I struggle to do with the Yamo Concert 11s I looked at last time. If you close your eyes and these are set up right, you really have a hard time figuring out where the sound is coming from. Center image is rock solid. Now I've had them hooked up to every amp I own at some point, so the 1120, the PM-KI Ruby, as well as the SR9600, and I think you do need a bit of grunt if you want to drive these things properly. I think that's down to the ribbon tweeter, but they're definitely a bit power hungry. Currently I've got them hooked up to the model 1120, which I don't think it has enough juice to daily drive, but I've done a lot of listening on the KI Ruby recently, which has plenty of juice, as well as teaming it up with some good old vintage electronics like the Meridian 207 CD player I've got running right now, and for more incisive listening, running some lossless audio through my Topping D50S DAC. They don't like to play particularly loud, and with certain genres they don't really enjoy life. But I found for, yacht rock, easy listening, jazz, even some soft electronic, they sound pretty good across those genres. It's just, dad rock, no, doesn't really work. And the more rapid electronic music also not so good. They're very easy to set up in that you don't need to do a lot of tweaking and fine-tuning to get them sounding good. The only thing you really need to worry about is making sure you have them at listening height, because of the ribbon design, the horizontal off-axis roll-off is quite dramatic. So if you stand up above the tweeter line, the high end just falls off a cliff. So you really got to make sure you have stands. Like I said at the start, those stands that they originally sold with were not optional. You can't put these on the floor and listen to them. One thing I am worried about, and I think you should worry about too, if you happen to stumble across a pair that you might want to buy, is the ribbon tweeter reliability going into the future. It's undoubtedly a very complex design, and I'm not sure if it goes, whether it will be repairable. It's just something to think about. I'm a warrior. I'm a worrywart. Okay, that's what I do. I worry that everything I own will break. My pair set me back, I want to say $250, which is very reasonable considering how much they were when they were new. Few scrapes, the grill cloth is sort of tearing in places, but not too bad overall. And like I said, I mean, they're not going to win any beauty contests, are they? Overall, if I had to give it an arbitrary rating, out of 5, I'd give these a light 3.5. A light 3.5. They're quite good at imaging. They're very detailed, but I think the detail comes from that boost in the treble, so that fatigue does set in after a while. They're also ugly as sin, but I'll give them bonus points for rarity. I hardly ever see these go up for sale, and I think if they do, it's still worth grabbing the pair, because if you've only experienced speakers with dome tweeters, this is a whole new sound, a different sound to what you've heard before, and it's good to just sort of dip your toes in the water, I guess, for ribbon tweeters.